Hey listener, welcome to the Comic Relief Podcast.
Hope you survived the experience.
The Comic Relief Podcast is an unscripted discussion about the pop culture surrounding comic books, with your hosts,
Uncanny Tawmis Logue
and Mighty Maico Moreno.
All right, so we are back after many long decades of being away from podcasting. We are back in the studio. How are you doing, Thomas?
Good. And I'm glad to be doing another podcast, finally.
Yeah, when was the last time we recorded, actually? When was the last podcast that came out? Was it the Rogue One?
The last one you and I did was San Diego Comic Fest.
Whoa.
Yeah, that was a while ago. And then...
that was a fun one, too.
Yeah, it was. That was the one where we had the folks from the X-Men animated series and all of that on there.
Yeah, that was back in, was it like April?
I think it was actually February, if we're going to be technical.
But anyways, it's been a while, and since then, a few movies have come out, so we have a lot of catching up to do. We had some very good string of movies come out, and all very different. We had Logan come out in March, very dark, noir-style movie, amazing. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 back in May. Again, another amazing movie that was back-to-back hits. Then recently here in June, we had Wonder Woman come out. Surprised the heck out of everyone. I wouldn't have believed this, but domestically, it's the number 2 movie in 2017 so far, just behind Beauty and the Beast. So domestically, It's Wonder Woman at 2, Guardians of the Galaxy at 3, Spider-Man Homecoming at 4, then Logan at 5, and then a shout out to the Lego Batman movie at number 8. So Wonder Woman came out swinging and has been killing it since. Yeah. And then, of course, we had the amazing, spectacular Spider-Man. Neither one of those. It's not
neither one of them. They just stopped putting titles in front of it.
Yep, exactly. We had Spider-Man Homecoming come out in July. I mean, these are just 4 back-to-back hits, man. And I've been itching to talk about them since they've each come out. So let's go ahead and jump in. What say you?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's start with Logan.
Cool. And then just as a quick precursor here, for the sake of brevity, we're going to try not to talk too much or especially in detail about these movies. We're assuming that you guys have seen these movies. They've been out for a while. So we're going to sort of skip the who are the actors in the movie, what are the premises, stuff like that. And we're just going to jump into what we liked, what we didn't like, and our general sort of impressions of these movies. And also from this point on, spoilers. Logan has been out for a while.
We shouldn't even have to say that.
We should not, but we're going to. If you have not seen any one of these movies, I would say stop listening right now. We're going to jump into Logan right now. Thomas, what was your impression of Logan?
I was surprised. I actually really liked Logan. I liked the direction they went with it, like that dark feeling. But my only real problem that I had with Logan is, once again, it's a Logan movie. It's rated R. We're going to see Logan cut loose, and I don't think we really did. I mean, we see him cut loose once against the guys who are going to carjack him or whatever, and then we see him cut loose when he injects the drugs at the very end to kind of boost him, and he's feral for like 2 minutes. My problem is that, once again, someone else proved to be the better Wolverine, or someone took away from Logan's performance, and I think X-23 stole the movie.
Yes, X-23 was awesome.
Yeah, she was a better Wolverine to me than Wolverine was.
So it's unfortunate. This has been our gripe for every single Wolverine movie, and all the X-Men movies as well. I think the closest we've gotten to an actual berserker rage is in X2, when the when the military is sort of invading the mansion, and he kind of breaks out and starts slicing people up. That's as close as that we've gotten to berserker rage, and that's pretty sad because that's not even very berserkery.
We did have another berserker Wolverine moment in X-Men Apocalypse when they first free him.
Oh, that's right. Yeah,
he does cut through the guards, but it's similar to the X-Men mansion scene. He's just cutting through people and then he runs out.
Yeah.
So cool.
But I agree. I do like how they went with a subtle R. So there is blood. There is, a serious violence and some cursing and some, but it's not in your face like Deadpool was. And Deadpool, of course, that's
Deadpool was a hard R.
Yeah, that's Deadpool's shtick though, right? Because it's a hard R. That's what they were going to do. That's what everybody was expecting. But with Logan, they did it very subtly, and I did like that it felt like if it wasn't Wolverine, right? If it wasn't Hugh Jackman popping his claws out and it was just, a dude, it would still be a good movie. It was a very well put together movie. I agree with your gripe about the Berserker rage. Like they had, again, just like the last Wolverine movie, they had the moment set up. They had the scene set up. Everything was just sort of like ready to go. He was pumped with the serum or whatever for him to go berserk and fell short. Just like the scene in the Japanese village in the Wolverine.
Yes, that should have been Wolverine cutting loose, and then instead he just falls in his face.
Who is the villain name? Pierce, right?
Donald Pierce. Yeah.
Donald Pierce. Boyd Holbrook was an excellent villain.
Yeah, he was. He really was. Yeah.
He was. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I wish they would have done more with him, because eventually, the villain does switch to be a clone of Wolverine, whatever. I think Pierce was the better villain, you know what I mean, rather than the clone Wolverine at the end.
They could have brought back Sabretooth. They could have used Omega Red. I mean, they could have used a better version of Cyber, better version than in the comics, because he sucks in the comics, but they could have used any slew of X-Men or Wolverine villains, but they went with
Wolverine.
With Hugh Jackman. With Wolverine.
And what's funny is, like, the villain Wolverine was a better Wolverine than Wolverine.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because he was just cutting through, kicking butt.
He was like a young Hugh Jackman.
Yep.
So the choice in villains really it did bug me a little bit.
To me, this would have been the perfect opportunity to introduce Omega Red. If you have this organization and you're going up against Wolverine, you're going to want something to sort of counter that healing factor that Wolverine has. This would be a good time to show Omega Red, whose coils basically absorb life. You know what I mean?
And perfect. if this is going to be the last Logan movie anyways, right? This is sort of the bookend of this franchise. You can just remove the whole Russian side of Omega Red out, right? I mean, just make an Omega Red that resembles like the Omega Red in the comics. I'm sure we would have been complaining about it though if they did do that, but
well, they could have easily said it was a Russian mutant who absorbs life. That's all they had to do.
That's it. Patrick Stewart, Charles Xavier was really good. I was surprised at how I wasn't expecting this movie to really tug at the heartstrings as much as it did. Have you read the comic that this movie's based off of, Old Man Logan?
I have not.
So in the comics, it's, again, spoilers if you haven't read the comics, it's like a mid-Wolverine. I think it's Mark Millar who did like a 2 or 3 issue Old Man Logan sort of a mini story, right? A mid-Wolverine run. And in the book, Wolverine is actually tricked by, oh my God, is Mysterio? Yes.
Yeah, that's what you had told me before, is Mysterio, which is odd because that's a Spider-Man villain.
It's a Spider-Man villain. Okay, so in the books, Mysterio, is sort of an illusionist, tricks Wolverine into thinking that the mutants at Xavier Mansions are all villains, right? So Wolverine wakes up out of his slumber and he sees that the mansion is overrun with villains, and he goes and just berserk rage kills everybody in the mansion. When he comes to, he realizes he's just slaughtered the X-Men, and he kills Mysterio, and he goes off on his, his what do you call that when you sort of like
sabbatical?
Is it a sabbatical? It's like, I'm going to take a long vacation.
Yeah. I may have messed up a little bit. I'm just going to go for a while.
So he sort of disconnects himself from all the world of superheroing and stuff, and fast forward into the future, and he's like an old dude, blah blah blah. I won't spoil any more of the story for you. That part of the story is within the first 2 pages of the book, so that just sort of sets up the story. In this version, I kind of like what they did. So Patrick Stewart, Charles Xavier is getting. I'm sort of getting a little older. He's losing control of his abilities, and he has these attacks that wipe out the X-Men. I like that spin on it. So they managed to sort of shoehorn Charles into the story, but not in a way that seems forced, right? I really liked the buddy story with Logan and Charles. I thought that was done really well. And then Logan and X-23, I thought that was done really well. So certain things I wasn't expecting from the movie that pleasantly surprised me.
That's what's kind of weird, though, right? Because there were essentially no mutants hardly left in the world because they put that stuff in the corn syrup.
Yep.
So apparently, did Charles Xavier just not eat anything that had corn syrup in it? Like he never had a Coke?
No, he's on a strict diet. Yeah, all natural, all organic. Probably paleo. I'm not sure.
Paleo, maybe. He has a strong enough mind to stick to a diet, I guess.
The one thing okay, so you had your thing that bugged you. It bugged me too. The one nitpicky thing that I had, and it even bugged me before it was announced. Still no costume. We have never had a Wolverine in costume. And when the movie was coming out and when it was in production and they had announced that Wolverine will not be in his uniform, I sort of went online and was, I wouldn't say I was, out there flaming people, but I was upset, man. I was like, give us a costume. They could have put that in somewhere. I don't know. It bugged me. A lot of people online were like, through the costume. Wolverine doesn't need a costume. Hugh Jackman's the best. And I don't know. I'm just sort of at odds with that a little bit. Like, why can't they give I understand that it wouldn't fit for this story, but a flashback, right? They have the comic books. They had the scene where he's looking at the comic books and he's talking to X-23 and he's like, oh, it wasn't like that. You just throw a little bit of a flashback scene in there, you know what I mean? A little fan service, but we never got to see Hugh Jackman in costume other than the biker leathers that they had in the X-Men movies.
Once again, the closest we got to Wolverine, quote unquote, in costume was, again, Apocalypse, where he was wearing at least the Weapon X costume thing. Yeah, that's true. The thing on his head and the thing on his crotch.
That is the only comic book costume that Wolverine wore.
Yes.
This movie did really well. Critically, it did really well in the theaters, in the box office. There were talks of awards. So it was one of those movies that isn't just like a good comic
movie.
Yeah. It's a good movie in general. So if people that maybe didn't like superhero movies necessarily, they would probably still enjoy this. With even the very slightest knowledge of X-Men and mutants and stuff, they would still probably enjoy this. Would you recommend this movie to folks?
I would, because as you said, it is a movie that is more than just a superhero movie. You know what I mean? There's a lot of heartfelt moments in it, even though at the very end, spoiler, we already said it, Wolverine dies and X-23 is there.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I felt nothing. For me, I don't know why. Like, Chris was like, I got teary-eyed. I was like, yeah, it was weird. Like, that scene happened. I was like, all right, cool.
What's funny is we went out the first time I saw this movie, right? We went out for drinks before the movie and we went to one of those theaters where you can drink inside the movie theater. So the drinks continued, right? I didn't remember too much of the movie, right? I remember the factor
wasn't countering the alcohol.
No, I kept up with the beats though, and I got teary-eyed in a few different scenes. Very teary-eyed in a few different scenes, and I came out of the movie very emotional, and I thought it was wonderful. And that's sort of how I explained it to people for the next couple of weeks afterwards. That oh my God, it was so emotional, and I teared up. And then I watched it again to get sober, and I was like, yeah, I don't know.
You're like, it's a good movie.
It's a good movie. I don't know why I was crying. Alcohol may have had something to do with it.
Yeah. Alcohol is a depressant, whether you know it or not.
Yeah.
So I have a question.
Sure.
You said that Mark Millar did that Wolverine Mysterio Old Man Logan story, right? Who was it that did the Alias or Jessica Jones story? Was it Mark Millar also?
No. The Alias story was Brian Michael Bendis.
I was just going to say, it's interesting that they take Purple Man. All he ever did was go around, possess people, and make him rob banks for him so he would never get caught. And then they turned him really dark for Alias. And I thought it was maybe the same writer because they take Mysterio, who's just like, hey, I'm this illusionist, kind of doesn't really, not a very serious kind of villain, and then turned him very dark as well. So that's interesting.
Mark Millar is one of my favorite writers, man. He He takes characters that are campy and goofy and stories that are just very comic book cliche and turns them into like really good stories. By the way, I like that they made Purple Man sort of not really a villain, but sort of just kind of like a jerk.
Not a villain. Do you remember what he did to the couple when he goes in the house?
Yeah, but he wasn't necessarily like out to rule the world or conquer the city. He was just messed up in the head.
Yeah, all about him.
Yeah, and Jessica Jones. He was pretty obsessed with her.
Well, that was because of the Resistance.
How many X's would you give Logan 0 to 23?
0 to 23? I'd probably give it about like 18.
18 X's?
Yeah, and most of it is for X-23. You know, the Professor X story was very heart-wrenching, but X-23 is the one I was mostly vested in. And it's amazing because she doesn't speak for almost half the movie.
I think that's what I like the most about her.
Yeah, you're like, just don't talk. Cool that she was able to convey that.
Yeah, she was able to convey a lot of emotion and, just through facial expression and stuff.
Yeah, and the screaming.
We have similar opinions or outlooks on child actors, that child actors are hard to come by and they can make or break a movie, right? They can definitely take you out of the experience if you have a bad child actor. Whoever the little girl is, I forget. I'm sorry, I apologize. I don't have it in front of me, but she did really well. When she started talking, it was amazing that I didn't realize that she hadn't talked the entire movie until she started talking, and I was like, wow, her voice is annoying.
See, her voice didn't bother me, and I like that she cut between English and Spanish all the time when she was talking. That was so great.
So yeah, I would give the movie maybe 20 X's out of 23, something like that. Sort of in that ballpark. It was the stuff that I didn't like are very sort of nitpicky things, but overall it was a great movie that I would show someone that's not in comic books. It's a good movie. All right, so moving on to the next movie. This is something that I've been dying to talk to you about, and we are talking about Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. Came out on my birthday, May 5th. Open it up here, man. What did you think? For a little background, and I'm sure a lot of folks out there probably are very much aware of this. The first Guardians of the Galaxy movie was a box office success, mostly in part to Thomas going to the movies every other day to
30
watch
times.
So, what was your opinion on Volume 2?
I liked Volume 2. There was a lot of great moments in Volume 2, but there was also, it was nowhere near as good as Volume 1.
Nowhere near as good.
No, like for me, Volume 1 is probably my top hero movie ever, and I would say Volume 2 probably falls in like number 8, 9, or 10.
Wow, so that much of a difference, huh?
Like, for example, I know everyone's going to shoot me and hate me. Like the very beginning where they go after the battery acid eating monster thing.
Mm-hmm.
And there's all that action happening in the background, but the camera focuses on Baby Groot dancing around the whole thing with occasional cuts to what's happening in the background. And it was funny, right? Like you see Rocket land, he's like, don't eat that, slaps it and flies back. That was funny. But I think they focused too much on Baby Groot in the beginning. Like I was like, oh, okay, that's funny, it's cool. And then like they kept focusing on and walking around the thing, and I'm like, I actually want to see what's happening in the background, because that's where I was more interested in. I want to see this cool fight that's about to happen with this alien that just burst through. Mm-hmm. And it was like Baby Groot dancing all for 5 minutes, and I was like, okay, I get it. Baby Groot is like what everyone loves. I got it. But shoving it in my face for the first 5 minutes was too much. So
I see what you're saying. So you get that it was sort of a wink and a nod to the audience saying, hey, this is what, it's sort of a bit of a joke scene, but it went too far for you.
Yeah, it was just too long. That's all.
I thought it did go long too, but it didn't bother me. I was smiling the entire time. I really was. I enjoyed it.
Like I said, it was definitely funny.
And then Groot had his little fight with the bug or something. Wasn't it a little alien bug or something?
Yeah.
He had like a little.
It's the same bugs from the Guardians of the Galaxy 1.
Oh, at the opening scene that Peter Quill kicks and uses as a microphone.
Yeah, and they use it later. You remember when Drax is betting with Rocket? It's right when they're going to go see the Collector, and they're all waiting, and then the little bug bugs were running around on that board.
Oh,
They're
okay.
getting eaten by
Oh, yeah, you're right.
Yes.
We could do a podcast on this movie alone. There are so many scenes and interactions and characters. I guarantee you we're going to miss some amazing thing that happened in this movie. I apologize ahead of time. I think this movie was awesome. I think it was better than the first one. There, I said it.
better than the first one.
Yeah.
Really?
Yes.
I loved Kurt Russell as Ego. I love that they reveal that Peter Quill's mom died because of him.
Dude, that was actually a pretty emotional. I wasn't expecting that.
That's what I was about to say. I mean, that was a heart-wrenching moment for me.
Yeah.
I was like picking up my jaw from the floor, like, holy, he's the reason. Because that scene in the first Guardians of the Galaxy movie was heart-wrenching. Like when she's like, Peter, da da da, and then I was like, oh damn. Like
Yeah,
it still gets me.
The first 3 minutes of that movie, man.
Yeah.
Like, what are we watching here? But yes, when his eyes are sort of, when he's, when his eyes are glazed over and they're black and he's sort of, experiencing the universe.
Cosmos.
Yeah, experiencing the cosmos. And he sort of like comes back, realizing that Ego is the dude that killed his mom. I was like, oh snap, this is where the soundtrack changes tone. This is where the war drums come on,
Yep.
And it did, man. That was a great movie. And it's again, Guardians, much like Logan, it has a lot of sentimental beats that I don't expect, but they do so well, right? Aside from Peter and Ego, there's the whole scene with Gamora and Nebula, with Rocket and oh my God,
Yondu.
Yes, I'm sorry, with Rocket and Yondu, with Peter and Yondu. There are so many cool sentimental scenes, and they're quick, right? There are some scenes that go longer than others. It's not milked throughout they're not milked too long for throughout the movie. They sort of hit you unexpectedly, and then they jump on to the next thing, but they're done really well.
I agree. The Rocket and Yondu part, that was amazing.
Yeah.
Where he's like, I only have like one of these left, and he's like, do it.
That and the scene where Rocket's sort of having a meltdown, and he's like, you know what? I'm just like you. Oof. That was a good scene.
Oh, yeah. On the ship.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Oh man. So for me, it's hard to really pick the one character that stole the movie, because they all had their great moments, right? Drax killed it with his sort of with his humor, and
Drax and Mantis was
yes. But I think
amazing.
For me, Yondu stole the movie for me, man. He is the first death in the MCU that I think really had an effect on me, anyways. You know what I mean? Where it was like, I was hoping to see him in, Infinity War and Volume 3 and all these other movies, and they took him away. Sucks.
I don't know. Probably the most emotional scene is that scene where, Yondu's died. They bring him to the ship and they're doing their, this is what we do on Earth, blah, 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 say our farewells. And then they do the, I don't even know what that's called. Like, basically they turn him to energy dust, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And then all the other Ravagers, they all show up. Do the fireworks thing. That killed me.
Yeah, normally I would think like a scene like that is really cheesy and I would pick it apart. But it didn't bother me with Guardians. I thought it was pretty freaking cool.
Yeah, that scene is the equivalent to Peter Quill's mom for me.
Yeah, they did.
I
They
saw
did
that
really
scene,
well.
I was like, oh God, here we go. Why is it so dusty?
And I do also like the fan service that they did with with
with Ego.
Movie. Oh my
With Ego.
God, man!
Show us the planet. Oh,
I wouldn't say it's the biggest and best scene in all of the MCU has been, pun intended, Ant-Man going giant. Wasn't expecting that. It came out of left field as soon as, and I've said this before, as soon as Lang said that he's, he has a trick up his sleeve, blah, blah, blah. He's got a big secret, whatever it was. I was like, what? I pricked up. Yeah. When I saw that shot of Ego, the planet Ego from a distance, where you see the eyes and you see he sort of has beard and stuff, I got super excited, man.
Oh, yeah.
I was like, they did it. They freaking did it. The things that you think would not translate into a movie, that just wouldn't make sense, the undoable things. MCU just keeps cranking them out. That and Yondu's mohawk as well, man. Like, it's just these little things that just make me so happy.
How they made it bigger.
Yeah. When they put on his the big fin mohawk,
Yeah.
I was like, oh, there it is. They did it.
I did like that scene in Guardians where they have Groot to go fetch the the mohawk. He's like, nope, that would be my underwear.
This is one of my favorite movies of 2017. I have 4 favorites, and they're Logan, Guardians, Wonder Woman, and Spider-Man.
Imagine that.
The difference in these movies and these styles are the reason why we haven't hit that superhero oversaturation point that everybody's worried about. Everybody's worried about this tipping point. But these movies, look how different Logan is from Guardians, both based on superheroes, right? Not just comic books or like indie comics or anything. These are based on goofy superhero characters, and they're so different. It's amazing that like stories like Guardians, Doctor Strange, Spider-Man, Civil War, all these movies all take place in the same world, man. They're so vastly different and so like unique in their own way.
Everyone's like, oh, it's just a superhero movie. Yeah, you try to watch that Yondu scene without crying. You know what I mean? For these quote-unquote silly comic book movies, there is some seriously great character moments.
Like we mentioned earlier, you've seen the first Guardians of the Galaxy. A lot. Dude, do you have a count on how many times you've seen the first Guardians in the theater?
In the theater, I think it was about 8. Not even joking. I saw it like 8 times.
That's incredible, man. Sort of to wrap up the Guardians, I think the biggest... besides the story here, I thought it was really, really well done. This movie was about the characters. I mean, you had the story with Nebula and Gamora really surprised me, right? They had the scene where they were sort of tracking each other down and
trying to kill each other.
Yeah, and then Nebula sort of
breaks
down and confesses to why she keeps trying to kill her, and it's a very heartfelt, sort of a moment. And then, of course, Drax and Mantis, scene stealers, man.
They were every time they were on the scene together, they were incredible.
Besides The Rock, right? Besides The Rock, there aren't many wrestlers that have come out of WWE that have had a successful acting career. Now, there are exceptions. There have been wrestlers that have done movies. Like Hulk Hogan's done a ton of movies.
Yeah.
Randy Macho Man Savage, Roddy Piper, right? You have those guys. But to come out and be in a movie and not be, hey, that's Dave Bautista, the wrestler. No, he is Drax.
He's Drax.
Yes. Yeah. He did a really good job. And it's good to hear, like, even from the first Guardians, that he took this role very seriously. He took acting classes. He's killing it, man. The sense of humor in this movie and his scenes are awesome.
And that's like a good point that you make, that when wrestlers get into movies, let's just take Triple H.
Triple H. You're going there.
Let's just take Triple H. Like when he shows up in Blade, I don't see him as another character other than Triple H with a vampire chihuahua.
Yeah, no, he's not.
Know what I mean?
Yeah, it's Triple H. It's Hunter Hearst Helmsley.
When I see Dave Bautista, I don't even see him. I see Drax. Like as soon as he shows up, he sells me as Drax. You know what I mean? He just shows up and I was like, oh, it's Drax. Not, oh, it's that wrestler dude all painted up in green and red.
Amazing job. And they were going to cast Matthew McConaughey, or they were looking at Matthew McConaughey being Ego, but instead he did the Tower series. McConaughey, I think, would have done a pretty decent job, but I think Kurt Russell had the look, the age. He looked like a sort of like, an older, weathered cosmic being. I think he played that role really well.
Yeah, and especially when they show him like in the 80s with Peter Quill's mom. Like he looks like Kurt Russell from frickin' Tango and Cash.
We're going to get FUBAR now.
What the hell's FUBAR?
You'll see.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He looks he fit perfectly both as the 80s and as the older being that you see later on. So I think also I had expectations for what I wanted to see in the second one. For example, what I really liked about the first Guardians of the Galaxy movie was the buddy system that they had with Rocket and Groot. Like they were best friends, inseparable. And then in the second one, they're not. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
They're not. They hardly even seem like friends because Groot's like the baby. He's like always fighting with Drax. Like if you watch him, he's like punching Drax in the leg and stuff like that. So I'm kind of bummed that they took away that best friend relationship between those two. But then we get a best friend moment between Rocket and Yondu later. But I always like those buddy things, and they took that away from me.
Well, they changed it to be Mantis and Drax.
Yeah. Yes.
A little bit, right?
Yeah.
And I thought I like the take that Groot dying in the first movie, and then this new baby Groot is a whole separate being, right?
Yeah.
So it's not the Groot from the first Guardians. So I dig that take. And then at the sort of the stinger at the end of the movie with the teenage Groot. Yeah. Dude, I love that scene. And if you notice, okay, so Comic-Con just happened this last weekend, and they released a poster for Infinity War. And if you can look this poster up online, it's sort of like a 3-part giant poster. If you notice in the upper left-hand corner, you have a teenage Groot, or what looks like a teenage Groot. It doesn't look like, obviously not the baby Groot, and not the Groot from the first movie, the full sort of adult Groot, but it looks more like the younger Groot from the Stinger. So that's an interesting choice. We're going to see sort of a maybe Groot meets Peter Parker type character. You know what I mean? Still making mistakes, sort of hot-headed. That's going to be an interesting take on Groot. 3 different versions of Groot. This is a tree.
We're watching a tree grow.
Yeah. I like the direction they're going with Groot. I get, though, that they broke up the buddies.
Yeah.
But Groot sacrificed himself in the first movie. So, okay. Any other thoughts on Guardians 2?
No, I mean, the only thing I would add is I think my main complaints with the movie are very trivial, right? If they had trimmed some of these scenes down, I would have probably liked it more, because I felt like there were times where I thought the pacing was being lost. How many baby Groots would you rate it?
How about 0 to 3?
So I'd give it two baby Groots.
Baby Groot, teenage Groot, and adult Groot. You would give it a teenage Groot?
I'd give it a teenage Groot. I would.
I would give it a full adult Groot. 3 out of 3. I loved this movie. Like I said, I loved it better than the first ones. I can't argue against what you were saying about making those scenes shorter. I absolutely agree that it would improve. It definitely wouldn't hurt to cut some of those scenes down a little bit. So I mean, I'm not going to sit here and argue that they're just right, or they could be longer. You're right. They could be cut down, but it didn't bother me. It didn't bother me at all. All right. So switching religions a little bit here, we are introduced to the first official entry from DC Warner Brothers into the comic book movie fray, Wonder Woman. And that was a very tongue-in-cheek introduction, because the other movies have not been very good and have not done well critically. Although they've done okay in the box office, they were just sort of felt rushed, blah, blah, blah. We're not going to get into that, because we finally got our first DC/Warner Brothers movie, and it is Wonder Woman.
Yes.
All right, man. Tell me, what did you think of Wonder Woman?
With the previous history that we said we won't talk about with the Superman movies and then the Batman vs. Superman, I honestly went in, like, I saw the Wonder Woman trailers and I was like, don't do it. Don't feel hopeful. They're just going to sucker you. They always do good with trailers. So I kind of went in with low expectations and came out with my mind blown. If I were to rank all of my superhero movies, I would say Wonder Woman ranks up in there, probably in my top 5.
That is a tough conversation to have. Thoroughly enjoyed it. I mean, the problems that I had with it are very nitpicky, but for me, it's hard to sort of pierce like the Civil War, the Guardians of the Galaxy, the first Avengers movie. Like, this movie better be firing on all cylinders, which it came pretty close to that. It definitely cracks my top 10, but I don't know if it'll crack my like top 5 or top 3.
Yeah.
And that's I don't want that to sound disparaging, because it was a very well done movie. And again, the theme here is that it was a good movie as well as a good superhero movie.
Yes.
Gal Gadot was amazing in this.
Yeah. Yeah.
She killed it. Her and Chris Pine, the chemistry they had together was really well done. They had a lot of
amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. It was funny. It was awkward. It was exactly how you would expect someone that's been disconnected from like reality, living on an island, on their own separate island their entire life, right? Like she played that part off really well. And Chris Pine is awesome also. So
I mean, from start to finish, I think I only have one stupid trivial complaint about the movie.
There wouldn't be. It's not a superhero movie if you didn't have a trivial complaint about something.
Right? Because I trivial complain everything. But this one is so stupid and trivial. It doesn't even like hamper the movie. I just thought it was an odd moment of when Wonder Woman defeats Ares. at the very end, all the Germans who were under Ares' control are suddenly free from his control, and they get up and they start hugging each other. And to me, I was like, yeah, 15 minutes ago, you just gas bombed an entire village and killed everyone. So you're still kind of guilty.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're still kind of like murderous people. Like I said, this is just one of those things where if I had a chance to edit it, I would have had, just as Gal Gadot is defeating Ares, like, the American army and British army all show up around the Germans, and they just hold their hands up. You know what I mean? Like they realize what's happened, but they hold their hands up. So that, okay, these guys are going to be punished for what they just did. Because the impression you get is like, oh, they're all free. So cool. Like, I'm not held accountable for the 300 people I just gassed and killed in a village.
Okay, how about you have them come to and have them realize what they've done and maybe like show some remorse, break down crying, or just kind of crumple, you know what I mean? Like have them all crumple over.
That's like I said, that's probably the only part I really had a problem with. And the other thing is there's that sniper guy that's with the team, and they're like, oh, he's the best sniper, but we never get to see him do anything. Like all the other dudes on the team kind of got a moment to shine. Like, oh, I'm more than this. I'm also a singer. They all had kind of like a moment to do something, except for the sniper guy.
I wonder if they cut his scene out or if they just never wrote it in, because he had that moment where he choked, right? He couldn't do it. And you feel like that sort of sets him up for his like the real moment where he just goes nuts and snipes everybody.
I thought there was going to be a moment like where he just does something at the last minute and saves the day or whatever, or that they show why he chokes. Like maybe he went to snipe like some guy and like a kid stepped in the way and he sniped the kid on accident, and he's not been able to be sure of himself ever since then. Like, what if someone steps in the way of my shot?
So what I think they were going for here, and I won't go off on too much of a tangent here, but have you ever seen The Magnificent Seven?
I have not, and I want to.
There's a character who he's a sharpshooter, and he's on The Magnificent Seven. I won't get too much into the spoilers here, but he's supposed to be like their sharpshooter, but he chokes, similar to the guy in Wonder Woman, right? And then there's a scene where the other guys in the gang sort of notice this. Chris Pratt's in this movie, and he notices this, and he gives him this squinty-eyed look, like, "Are you really good, or are you chicken?" You know what I mean? It doesn't come up again until he's training the village to defend themselves, and he's sort of giving them marksman classes. This guy who's like, I think he's an ex-Confederate soldier or general or something, and he's giving all these villagers a hard time, telling them, you got to shoot like this, you got to breathe like this, you guys are doing it all wrong. And then one of the guys in the Magnificent Seven says, "Hey, you know who?" He tells the villagers, "We have one of the best marksmen in the Confederacy." Whatever. I'm totally blowing the dialogue here, and he's putting him on the spot, right, to see if in fact he is who he says he is.
As he is.
He takes the rifle, he sort of hesitates, he's you can see he's sort of shaky, and he aims at the target, and it's a sort of a little bit of a drawn out scene, and then he just unloads, blah 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 blah, and hits the same target in the bullseye over and over and over. Like, he empties his chamber and he proves himself that he is that person, right? And then later on it goes into the story where like he sort of regrets being this person, and he doesn't want to go back to that, and it's explained why he sort of chokes.
Right.
In the Wonder Woman movie, we don't get that from our sniper.
Yeah, we don't.
He just chokes.
Those are literally the only two complaints. The rest of the movie, I was literally like edged on my seat, just leaning forward watching the movie, because I was like, oh, this is awesome. Oh, she goes through that tower, the building with her shield. I was like, oh my God. Like, there was so much done right.
Dude, the fighting scenes in this were so good. And I know it's like some people complain online that a lot of those like slow motion action scenes were a little overdone, but I liked them. Wonder Woman felt like she was a friggin' beast.
Yep.
I think the action was really well done. She had the scene where she crosses no man's land, right?
I was just about to talk about that. That was actually emotional to me. You know what I mean? She gets up there and she's like stepping forward. Bullets are hitting her shield. She's stepping forward, and bullets are hitting her shield. She's stepping. I was like, dude, that's amazing.
She stole Superman's scene. Superman's scene. That was a Superman scene, and Superman never pulled it off in his movies.
Nope.
Right? Wonder Woman.
He was too busy tearing down buildings.
or listening to Pa Kent
Yeah.
Because in this scene, it was very similar to that, right? Like the soldiers and Chris Pine and everybody were telling her, you can't go out there, you can't do this, you got to stay hidden. And she was like, no, I didn't come here to hide. I came here to fight. So she throws off her cloak, she grabs her shield, grabs her sword, and just like faces the odds, are not in her favor. So there's a wall of bullets coming at her, and she just marches on through. And I thought that was an amazing scene. And immediately I thought, there it is, DC/Warner Brothers. There's a scene that you should have had in your very first Superman movie that we had to wait like 5 movies to get.
A woman facing like unseen enemies and marching forward. Oh, so good.
So, some of the biggest complaints from fans recently have been the representation of women in these movies, right? And we've all heard even with the Avengers, like when the toys come out, there's no Black Widow toys, there's no toys for girls to play with,
right?
And this is a Wonder Woman movie directed by Patty Jenkins, a female director, and it's outselling all the other movies domestically so far. DC and Warner Brothers definitely beat Marvel to the punch on this one. So props to DC and Warner Brothers, man.
And what I think is awesome is all those people who lacked faith or hated the idea of Gal Gadot doing Wonder Woman. This movie should shut their face.
You don't hear anything about it anymore, huh?
Yeah.
Remember when they cast her? Even when she came out,
she's too skinny. Her aren't big enough. Whatever. Yeah. She nailed it. Shut all your faces.
Absolutely nailed it. So you mentioned your sort of nitpicky thing in the movie. I had a couple of nitpicky things as well that I thought were just interesting choices, right? The soldiers coming back and hugging at the end of the movie. I thought I'll come out and say it. I think that was a bad choice.
Yep.
But there were some choices that weren't necessarily bad, but were interesting. For example, Ares, the god of war. I liked that it was the sort of the British politician guy. I think he was either politician or general, whatever.
Yeah.
But I thought it was an interesting choice that even when he was Ares, he looked exactly the same. He still had that mustache. He still had the sideburns, right? I honestly thought he would have like morphed or transformed into like, a demon god, you know what I mean? Like, but he was literally still like the gray-haired, gray mustache little British dude, just yoked.
What's interesting is on the Wonder Woman New 52, Ares comes to her, not like so much as a villain, but he is an old man. And Wonder Woman, they end up fighting, and she ends up killing him, and she becomes the goddess of war. But in New 52, he was actually an old man.
Again, it wasn't necessarily like a bad choice or anything like that. I just thought it was like, oh, here I was expecting him to like morph into more of like a Greek god type figure. Nah, old British dude.
Old British dude. He didn't want to give up his disguise.
A few other things. All of these things are all at the end of the movie, right? It's like the last 15 minutes of the movie. I thought it was surprising, even though it wasn't bad, when she originally thought that the German scientist was Ares.
Ares, yeah.
And she straight up stabs and kills him. And I was like, whew. And I know DC Comics has traditionally been a little darker in books.
Yeah.
And in the movies as well. I thought that was a crazy scene where she just stabs him with her sword and then is upset to realize that she just killed a dude and it wasn't Ares. Yeah. Like, granted, there wasn't like dripping blood or anything like that, but I just thought it was a sort of a non-heroic moment.
Yeah, I thought that was a cool scene where she was so obsessed with like trying to find and kill Ares and being so certain of herself that she kind of made a mistake.
Like I said, it didn't bother me. I just thought it was an interesting scene. And then finally, for me, the last nitpicky thing was in the last fight scene where she's fighting Ares and sort of getting her handed to her. She channels electricity and we have a new power set. Well, what happened there? It could have been done better, but it's a great movie. I recommend it. I know my daughters loved it.
How many golden lassos would you give this?
How many golden lassos of truth?
Yeah.
I would give it 9.
Tell the truth. 9? Yeah. I would give it a 10. All right. So next we're going to swing into action with... Spider-Man Homecoming. You start this time.
Yeah.
I think I've started every time.
Yeah, I feel like I talk a lot. So this is Spider-Man Part 6. Is it Part 6 now? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? Yeah, Part 6.
Okay, sure.
Part 6. Spider-Man the reboot 3, 2, the second reboot. So I thought this movie was, I mean, whatever, amazing, spectacular, superior. It was all these things. And for me, what they got right was what I've been complaining about with all the previous movies. Small scale Spider-Man movie, right? Let's start with that. Spider-Man isn't saving the world. Spider-Man is saving New York.
Yep.
He's saving Queens. I loved that they went sort of smaller scale. They scaled it back a little bit with Spider-Man. He has the best intentions in the world, but he keeps screwing up. He's obsessed with being a superhero. He wants to be a superhero. He wants to do his best. He wants to impress Tony Stark. Spider-Man 2 for the longest was my favorite movie because it was closest to the comics, but I think Spider-Man Homecoming now is my favorite Spider-Man movie, easily.
For me, this is probably my favorite Spider-Man movie. So I think with Homecoming, they actually got it, both Peter Parker and Spider-Man right. I wonder if Spider-Man was the first person to do selfies.
Oh, he probably was.
Because he always took pictures of himself as Spider-Man.
Yeah, guaranteed. Let's talk about some of the points in this movie, man. First of all, the opening is awesome. Peter Parker's doing his video journal, and he's interacting with Happy. By the way, props to Happy. It was cool to see Happy back in the movies. A nice little homecoming. So the journal is Spider-Man's sort of video journal, meeting with Happy Hogan, getting his costume, getting the new costume, jumping into the Civil War. He is such a goofy, excited, high-energy Peter Parker, and it fits so well, and it's such a great introduction into doing what Marvel does, tying everything together. I thought it was brilliant.
This has been all the Spider-Man movies. The only thing I don't like is when they did show him, it's only a few scenes where you see him like swinging through the city. Like he looks like a little piece of red elastic. Like his body isn't moving like a body. I was just watching, it's that new Tarzan movie with the dude from True Blood. It might even be just called Tarzan, whatever.
It is, yeah.
And they show him swinging on a vine, and I was like, that's how they should do Peter Parker when he swings. Like, his body doesn't look like elastic. They do a close-up. It looks like his body maintains the same, consistency.
Yeah.
But it did nothing to break me out of the movie. I just thought, they still haven't got that part right,
Yeah, I agree with you. When he's swinging around, it looks strange. Can we talk about Michael Keaton?
And then what I love is when he puts on the costume, he still has that fur thing around his neck like the Vulture does in the comic. And I was like, that's a nice touch. They updated his costume, but they still kept a part of it with that little fur piece around his neck.
He wears the aviator jacket, which it makes sense. I think we had the same concern with the Vulture being too high-techy. Think Green Goblin in Spider-Man 1, where he's just like, I have this armor with this goblin mask. Why did they make a goblin mask for this armor? Who knows? Whatever.
Whatever.
Yeah.
And then still going with Vulture, that scene where he's driving Peter well, let me take a step back. When Peter goes to pick up the girl that he's going to take to prom and he opens the door, my jaw hit the floor. I was like, oh, like I couldn't figure out, like, did he know that Peter was coming here? And then he's like, oh, you're taking my daughter out. And I went, oh, snap, dude. And then that car ride where they're talking and Vulture is piecing together, hey, wait a minute, this Peter Parker guy might be Spider-Man. That car ride was intense.
So when he was being dropped off at Liz's house, in my mind, I was thinking classic movie scene. Vulture is going to have Liz and her family tied up, and Peter Parker, they're going to go into a fight. Like I was like, I could see it a mile away. Like this is going to be stupid. And he opens a door and it's her dad.
It's her dad.
Oh man. I was like, nice writing. I was going the stupid hokey Hollywood route. Even though like I sort of saw it coming, it still blew me away. And props to Tom Holland, man. That scene in her house when they're getting ready to go to prom and he can't take his eyes off of Vulture. Yeah. So good.
That whole scene is so intense.
Tom Holland sold the how do I even handle this? I'm just a kid. This is the dude that I've been chasing. This is the dude that is trying to kill me. And he really sells that anxiety so well, dude. I was anxious that entire scene. I hate it when they kill villains because then you stop yourself from being able to use that villain in sequels. And it bums me out, right? There's no need. Just lock him up. So the scene with the Shocker and Michael Keaton's pissed at the Shocker and he grabs the gun that he thought was the anti-gravity gun or something and just fries him. And immediately I thought, dude. And then he dusts off the power glove and gives it to the other guy, and he goes, "You're the Shocker now."
And I was worried because like the first Shocker, the one that he incinerates, even had like the sleeves, like the Shocker, that like crisscrossing sleeve pattern thing. But that dude later on puts on the same thing, the same kind of jacket. I don't know if that helps with like the vibrating thing, but I was like, oh, cool. So he put on the same sleeves.
I was happy when he came out with the yellow sleeves as well. I was like, oh, cool. You know the glove that he wears, that was Crossbones' glove, right?
I didn't know that.
So they even mentioned picking it up in is not Wachovia. Yeah, it was Wachovia, right?
Wachovia. You're right.
Yep.
You're right.
Yep. You caught the scorpion at the end too, right?
Oh yeah, at the very end in the jail scene.
Yeah. I honestly think that once the Avengers Infinity War sort of wraps up, I think that they're going to shift gears, and this is my prediction here. In the Ultimate Spider-Man, around the same run, Spider-Man was meeting these villains. They all banded together, of course, became the Sinister Six,
right.
And Spider-Man was overwhelmed and eventually had to call in the Avengers to assist him, and it ended up in a big crossover. So my prediction is that that's going to be the next pseudo-Avengers movies, much like Civil War was. We're going to have a Spider-Man Sinister Six starring various Avengers versus the Sinister Six. So I said it here. I haven't seen that sort of brought up on the internet, but I'm calling it. We have the Vulture. He's still very much locked up and around. We have the Shocker too, right? The Tinker is still out there. We have Scorpion, makes 4. So we have potentially. I mean, I honestly don't think the Tinker will be a Sinister Six.
Nah.
Maybe even not even the Shocker. I would be surprised if he actually became a Sinister Six character. So who are we missing here? Of course, the Green Goblin.
Yeah.
Or Hobgoblin could be a potential character. Dr. Octopus would be friggin' cool.
Right.
The Lizard.
Lizard is who I imagine we're going to see soon. Like, if Peter goes to college, I wonder if the Lizard is going to... Well, that could be... Yeah, but I wonder if that'd be too similar to the other movie, because that's exactly what happened in the other movie.
Are they going to do characters that we haven't seen yet? We just recently had a Sandman, Lizard, Venom. We've recently had all these characters. I think out of that whole Rogues Gallery, they're going to do the solo Venom movie. So we know he's going to be out there. Sony's going to do that.
You know who I'd like to see? And it'd keep it kind of small, not big scale, is Kraven.
What bugs me about Kraven the Hunter is that they always give him this sort of like big mulleted outback mustache kind of a vibe to him, and I get that's his look, but like I can't get around that.
Hopefully maybe see a Mysterio.
Mysterio would be cool.
Yeah, or Beetle for Sinister Six. Yeah, a dude in armor who goes around robbing banks.
That totally, that would fit right in. I'll give you the ultimate low-key character that would blow people's minds. Like if I were at Marvel and if I were, in any sort of creative control, I would put my career and my name and everything on the line, and I would say bring in Wilson Fisk from the Netflix series. Don't announce it. Don't put it in the trailer.
You know, it'd be a cool trailer. Like the final trailer before the movie, like they do all the snazzy stuff. And at the very end of the trailer, just show like a hand twitching in front of a photo. Remember in the Daredevil scene where he's standing in front of the picture and his hand twitches a little bit?
Yeah. Dude, that'd be dope.
That would be dope. Because then it's just a hand and you're like, whose hand is it? And then if you recognize the picture, you get the reference.
Yes. Anyways, dude, we went off on a wild tangent here. Again, another one of the big gripes that I had and a lot of people had was the origin story, right? Everybody knows, just like Batman, everybody knows Spider-Man's origin. We don't need to see Uncle Ben get killed for the umpteenth time.
What I did like, where his best friend's like, I wonder what would happen if I would have got bit by the spider. And he's like, hey, the spider's dead. And that's as far as they go with the origin.
Yeah, that was a nice little nod. One of the things that they did also that I liked is I don't know if you ever watched the Ultimate Spider-Man cartoon.
I did not.
I did, and I thought it was very well done, very well animated. The stories were awesome. The voice acting was great. And in that show, he's sort of picked up by S.H.I.E.L.D. And they give him tech, much like Tony Stark. Tony Stark is allowing him to do his thing. He gives him some tech, gives him a little bit of help. So they sort of supplement Spider-Man learning how to use his powers with Spider-Man learning how to use his suit. And he's seeing all these like different settings that his suit has, which I thought was
That
funny
was really
and well
funny.
done.
Lethal mode on. No, lethal mode off.
And the tech allows him to do all the cool stuff with his webs.
Yeah.
This movie was incredibly diverse. This is one of the most diverse superhero
acting?
movies. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and it totally makes sense because they're in New York, so there's going to be a lot of different shades of
People.
colors and backgrounds and people. And I know there was a lot of drama with Mary Jane not being Mary Jane, MJ being Zendaya, and her name being Michelle. What was it, Johnson? Whatever it was. I'm totally okay with that. They did like the love interests really well. It wasn't like an overwhelming superhero love interest. It didn't overpower the movie, which I thought was great.
Yeah.
I love this movie. I think they fixed everything that I had a problem with in the other movies. I think that this killed it. This is my favorite Spider-Man movie now. It was done perfectly.
So out of 10 web slingers, how many would you give it?
10.
10? Yeah. Same here.
My top whatever number is way too overcrowded.
Yeah. You have more than 10 in your top 10.
Yeah.
What's funny is like when I first came out of seeing Spider-Man Homecoming, I wasn't like entirely sold for some reason. Like it came out, I was like, it was entertaining. It was all right. But like the more I've talked about it with people, the more I've actually liked it.
On a sort of like a down note and a side note, Gambit is being reworked.
Is it? Tatum is still attached to it though, from
Still
what I
attached
understand.
to it. As of July 21st, 2017, Channing announced that they're rethinking Gambit yet again, right? Because Deadpool as an R was successful. Logan as an R was successful. I can see them going in that direction. I mean, my hopes are way down for this movie. All right, man. So we don't just talk about movies, right? Sometimes we actually do talk about comic books.
Comic books. The Gambit thing is a perfect transition.
Yes. Yes. You know what's funny though is that we said we would talk about 15 minutes for each movie. We didn't want to talk like for an hour on the first one and then have to like rush the other one. So we did the opposite.
Yeah.
Talked 15 minutes for the first three and then spent an hour on the last one.
But we'll just make this real quick because there's also like the X-Men, the X's list. So I just want to go over real quick that Marvel recently gave love back to the X-Men books, and they've launched X-Men Blue, X-Men Gold, Astonishing X-Men just came out, Cable, Weapon X, Iceman solo, and a Jean Grey solo. And there's a Generation X. So X-Men Blue is basically the teenage version of the X-Men brought to the present. It's a concept that I absolutely hate, but I knew as soon as they attached Cullen Bunn to it, I was like, I'm going to pick it up and read it because it's Cullen Bunn and that dude knows how to write. So the characters are actually pretty awesome in the book.
Does that piss you off?
Yeah, it upsets me that I like it. Like,
Yeah.
I want to hate it, but Cullen Bunn is such a good writer, and I knew this was going to happen. I was like, this dude is going to make me like these characters. Like, I still hate the concept that they are around, but he's making me enjoy the stories because he is knocking out of the park every single issue. And it's funny because like the Juggernaut's like fighting them, and these X-Men have never fought Juggernaut yet. So like there's this whole dialogue where Juggernaut's like, why do you act like you've never fought me before? You know, like what is wrong with you guys? So it's kind of funny that he is playing up on that. But X-Men Blue has been really good. The only other odd thing is that James Howlett from Wolverine's son, he's now a part of X-Men Blue.
You gotta have a Wolverine, man. I mean, like, I'll write your X-Men comic, but you gotta give me a Wolverine. I don't even care which
a Wolverine. Yeah. I'm going to switch over to X-Men Gold. My problem with X-Men Gold has always been like every issue they bring in like villains to basically job them. So they're there for like 2 pages just to show how bad the X-Men are. X-Men Gold is Kitty, Nightcrawler, Rachel Summers, who has a new name that I can't remember. It's Old Man Wolverine, Colossus, and Storm. So they keep bringing in these villains almost every single issue to just basically job them. Like the Serpent Society shows up and the X-Men job them. Cool. Serpent Society is kind of like a C-rate villain team, right?
Yeah.
That's not a problem. But they brought in Blastar, who's taken on the Fantastic Four. He was the king of frickin' what is that space? The Negative Zone? He was like the king of the Negative Zone. Like, dude's a major threat. And they took him out in 2 pages. And I was like, oh, come on. But the last couple of issues, they've focused on these new Sentinel nanite things, where their main their main mission is to look for any sort of mutation in humans. And this includes people who are blind, people who have cancer, any type of different mutation that they don't register as normal, they suddenly go out and start killing. So the X-Men are forced to get together to try to stop him. But like I said, like Old Man Wolverine's in that book. So then if you go to Astonishing X-Men, guess who's in that book? Old Man Logan. Yeah.
Oh, Old Man Logan, really?
Old Man Logan. Yeah. So he's in that book also, as well as Gambit appears and written very well. Psylocke, Rogue, Phantom X, who I don't care about, Mystique, Bishop, and Archangel. That's like a huge team.
Yeah, that's a good team. That's like a 90s team right there.
So it's funny that Old Man Logan is in this book as well. And then if you go to Weapon X, it's Old Man Logan, Sabretooth, Warpath, and Domino so far, which Weapon X was good, but the last couple of issues have been questionable. Then we have Cable, which has not been good. And then Jean Grey and Iceman also have their own solo series, which I'm not picking up. I'm not big on solo books unless they have like a big cast around them. Like Thor always had like the Warriors 3, Sif, Odin. He had all these characters always around him. So
yeah, the solo titles are always like hit and miss.
But my problem is with Jean Grey, they've already said they're going to explore the whole Phoenix story with her. And I'm like, it's already been done. It's already been done like 1,000 times. We don't need to see Teen Jean with the Phoenix Force now. The other X-Men book that they release is Generation X. The only appealing character to me is Jubilee.
So this is round. I don't even know what round this is anymore.
It's like round 1, 2. I think round 4 now.
All right, of our. What was it? Our favorite X's?
Our list of X's or something like that.
X's. Yeah, that's what it is. So we are now into the 2000s, right?
Yes.
The generation of X-Men that were in the 2000s. So just to kind of go over the premise of our list here, we've broken these down into 3 categories: costume, powers, and then overall. And we've given them a scale of 1 to 10. And we've gone through the original class, the 80s X-Men, the 90s X-Men, and then now we're moving on to the 2000s.
So in order to understand, you have to listen to all the podcasts that talk about this, because what we did is we took all these X-Men in one sheet and we gave a scale of only 10 characters could have a score of 10, only 9 characters could have a score of 9, 8 characters could have a score of 8, so on, so on, so on. And then everyone else would get a score of 1. So you're going to hear us giving scores of maybe like a 1 or a 2, but that might be because we ran out of like the 10s and the 9s and the 8s. So you kind of have to listen to all the previous podcasts as well, because it's not just this category. It's like all of the X-Men combined. So I just wanted to cover that before someone's like, what? Why'd you give this person such a low score? It's probably because I had my high scores in other parts. So you kind of have to listen to all the podcasts at comicreliefpodcast.com to catch up on all of the stuff that we've done with this.
I hate to sound so disparaging, but this is where the graph starts going down for me a little. There are a few that are awesome, that are amazing, but then we have a bunch that are not. So this is like we're riding the high peak of the 90s X-Men fame, right? Where they were just like rocking the comic book world. Every new character was a mutant. Every new villain, every new, you know what I mean, new series had some sort of mutant ties to it. Back in the 90s, man, going into the 2000s, it was all mutants all the time. All right, man. So go ahead and kick us off here.
Thunderbird 2, who was the Neil Shara, for his costume, I gave him a 1. For his powers, I gave him a 1. And for an overall, I gave him a 1. Like, there's absolutely nothing memorable about this character to me.
It's a very tricky thing to have a second iteration of a character, sort of a character taking over the mantle for another character. Sometimes it works, right? Sometimes it's fine. Like sometimes it's sort of built into it, right? Like the different Robins and stuff, that works fine. But then you have a character that just takes the name and it doesn't really work.
I agree.
And this is one of them. I also gave them 1s across the board. We'll just keep it at that.
We'll just move on. Let's see. Next we have Cable, the big gun tooting, big shoulder guy, don't show his ankles guy. First costume, I gave him a 5. It was kind of nothing to it. It was just a lot of guns. Powers, I gave him a 7.
To it. He had like the metal arm, the metal leg. He was ravaged by the the legacy virus?
Technovirus.
The technovirus. Yeah. Okay.
Legacy virus was the one that kills him.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'm sorry. Continue.
But yeah, I mean, he had all that, but it was a little like too much going on, right? Like, you had the metal arm and then all these big shoulder pads, and then he had the big gun. It was like a little too much. It was like sensory overload. So I just gave him like a 5. It wasn't bad. It wasn't good. It was 5. And then I liked his power set. And overall, I gave him a 6. You have to admit, that's kind of high scores for a guy who frequently professes his hatred of Cable.
Yeah, I'm actually surprised that you gave him such a high, that it's in like the positive range. So for his original costume, I gave him a 9. I'm not the biggest Cable fan. Like, I'm not. I'd be lying if I said I was the biggest Cable fan. But I thought his look was really cool. With the metal arm, the one shoulder pad. He's sort of like an older soldier with the silver gray hair and the glowing eye. And he has a ton of weapons and a ton of pouches. And he definitely epitomizes the 90s for me. So I do like his look. He has a cool look. Character is sort of all over the place for me. That's a whole nother conversation. His power set, I gave him a 6. I mean, I don't think I ever really understood his power set. So his power set is telekinesis. Right?
Telekinesis, yeah.
I mean, that's it. Like all the other time slipping and all that stuff, that's all tech.
It's all tech. But I rolled that into powers.
Because telekinesis, there's a dozen other characters that use telekinesis, but I like the time traveling aspect to his character. And overall, I gave him an 8. Like I said, I'm not a huge fan of Cable, but I do appreciate that he is like an iconic X-Men. He really is.
Next down the list, we go to the Native American Mirage / Moonstar, commonly known from the New Mutants. For her, I gave her a 9 on her costume. I dug, and this is based on her original costume, like when she was in the New Mutants. Yeah. I dug that she did the yellow and black, but then she had like the Native American boots with the tassels and stuff like that. Yeah. And she had like the braids in her hair. I loved that costume. Like, it was cool. She took that classic X-Men costume that's really hard to stand out and did something cool with it. And then for her powers, I gave an 8. Like, and this is based off her original power, the ability to pull someone's fear out of their head and create like an illusion out of it. Love that idea. But then what happens is my overall, she drops down to a 3 because she ends up gaining Asgardian powers through a storyline with the X-Men New Mutants. She becomes like a Valkyrie. She has a freaking Valkyrie horse.
Yeah, that's kind of a weird turn.
Yeah, and then she starts being able to see when people die, which is all right. That's kind of cool because that kind of ties in with someone's fear. But then they make her lose her power later. She loses her mutant ability, loses her Valkyrie powers, and now she's just a chick with a bow and arrow.
Yeah, she's depowered. Instead of going Valkyrie, why didn't they just go like some like Native American lore?
I know. When they turned her into a Valkyrie, they totally stepped away from like all her Native American stories. She became a Valkyrie. Like, there was nothing Native American about her anymore.
I gave her a 1 for the costume. She's never been one of my favorite characters. Her powers I also gave her a 1. I wasn't sure what her power set was anymore. And she doesn't have one. I do like the manifesting of, your worst fears. I think that's pretty cool.
I thought that was a unique take on basically telepathy, right? It's a very limited but unique form of telepathy. Anyway, carry on.
I gave her a 2 overall. I know you have a soft spot for Native American. Characters. Mirage has just never really caught my attention.
Next, we move to Sage, who was formerly a part of the Hellfire Club, later on became the X-Men's like living computer type thing. I give her a 1, 1, and a 1. There is absolutely nothing I like about Sage. She was better off with the Hellfire Club.
I read the entire Extreme X-Men run, and I enjoyed it, but I can't tell you a single Sage story / scene or moment, or I really can't.
And then next, moving on from the Hellfire Club, we go to the White Queen, who, for costume, you would think I'd give her a 10, right? Because it's a chick with really big upper area.
Wearing barely a costume.
But I gave her a 5 because, literally, there's not much to her costume. And while that is cool to visually stare at, there wasn't much to it, so I gave it a 5. But for her powers, I gave her a 7 because she is a very strong telepath. And then overall, I gave her a 6. If she was still in the Hellfire Club, I would have probably given her a 10, but when she became a hero and became Scott's new bedside partner, it went down for me.
I don't like her being a good guy, especially like it's just she seems so out of place being like the dean at a school for gifted youngsters with all these children, and she's walking around with like a bathing suit, camel toe, and a corset. You know what I mean? It's like, dude, it's weird. It's out of place. It doesn't fit right. Like, she didn't even she doesn't even cover up. And with that being said,
for costume, I gave her a 10.
Obviously.
That's like the pervy 9-year-old in me giving her a 10 for a costume.
She did have students, the Hellions, who were all killed by Trevor Fritzoy, I think is how it's pronounced. The dude that Bishop was always chasing around.
Yep.
So when she was in Generation X, you remember she was there with Banshee, right? And so when I was collecting Gen X, I was like, okay, she's going to do something to be, to flip. She's going to turn heel, right? I always thought that's why White Queen and Banshee were both co-teaching. I thought it was a setup that she was going to turn heel and then Banshee would eventually just be the only teacher there.
Yeah.
But then that never happened.
So anyways, overall, I gave her an 8. Her powers, I gave her an 8. I thought it was cool that she turns into Diamond. It's sort of.
You like the secondary mutation?
Yeah, I'm okay with that. And overall, I gave her an 8. I do like the White Queen character, but I like her more as a villain. I wish there would have been some sort of a payoff that this whole time she was with the X-Men, she was really like
working them.
We
next go to Zorn, who is working with the White Queen, and he is next on our list. For me, I gave Zorn 1-1-1-1. There is literally nothing I like about Zorn.
Really?
I hate that there was a Zorn, but then it was actually a Magneto, but then it wasn't Magneto. There's actually another Zorn that is actually Zorn, and then Zorn has like a twin brother who's like Zorn also. His whole story is a train wreck.
I gave him a 9 for a costume. An 8 for powers, but an overall 4. So a 9 for costume. I'm going off the pre-Magneto Zorn, and he has a star in his head, and he's got the metal casing, and I thought this dude was friggin' awesome.
Oh my god!
I like his look. I like that look. I like that story. I gave him a 4 overall. So he like peaks in costume. He was an awesome costume. He peaks in powers. Awesome powers. Overall 4 because of all the that they did afterwards. They basically threw him away.
From Zorn, we go from the chamber in his head to the actual character chamber.
There is a smooth transition.
There is a smooth transition. I just had to think about it after a second. For his costume, I gave him a 7. It was kind of cool that he had this big hole in his chest kind of thing. For his power, I gave him a 1, though. I'm not even entirely sure I understand his power other than he like shoots flames out of his mouth. I don't know. I don't even know if he does that. I can't even remember. For overall, I gave him a 5.
Really? Oh, man. I effing loved Chamber. In the same vein that I loved Zorn. For his costume, I gave him a 10. He seemed to me like a cool, sort of like I know he was British, but sort of like a James Dean kind of a cool dude, leather jacket. He already had that going for him. And then his chest exploded and he was just like a walking furnace. It's unique. He is very underrated in his look. I think he's up there, and I'm going to sort of, might be crossing the line here, but up there with like Ghost Rider.
Oh, all right. I thought you were going to say Adam X. Had to bring him up at least once in this podcast.
At least one. And his powers, I gave a 9. Overall, he gets an 8 for me. I really like Chamber.
See, I would have called him like Heartburn or something like that.
Yeah.
So next, probably one of the worst characters for me, even worse than Morrow. We have Stacy X, or sometimes known as Ecstasy. I gave her 1-1-1.
She's gross.
Yeah, she is gross.
I gave her a 1-1-1. And I think that's the, I want to say that's sort of the intention with her, right? Because she was scaly. She was a lizard.
Yeah, she was a scaly who she could use her pheromones to attract men, and then she was a hooker.
She was able to read you through your pheromones, right? So whatever you were sort of secreting, whatever pheromones you were secreting, she'd be able to read that, see that.
And both her and Chamber both lost their powers. And ironically, they both ended up on a version of the New Warriors. And she died in that story, but then like a couple months later, she showed up alive back as Stacy X with her power. And then Chamber, after like the Age of X, he got his power back also, if I remember correctly.
Okay, so Stacy X sucks.
Yep.
Or she doesn't suck, but she's just...
Well, she probably did as a hooker.
Yeah, she did. True.
So we'll move on from that and go to Lifeguard, who I gave a 1-1-1. I remember Lifeguard and Slipstream, who was actually next. They were brother and sister, I think.
Yeah, they were siblings.
And I think they had like golden armor, or he did, or maybe she did.
She did, yeah. She had golden skin.
But I can tell you nothing else about him. That's literally how much I remember.
One of them was a healer, no? No, I just looked it up. Her abilities are reactive adaptation. So what? She's sort of like what was dude's name? One of your favorite.
Yeah, random.
Yeah. 111.
And then what about Slipstream? You have that info up?
111 for Slipstream. So he used to ride a surfboard, and he had limited space-time manipulation and reality warping capabilities that enabled him to conjure a warp wave, psychic navigation use of a shortened metal surfboard, and the ability to take other people through the warp wave through increased concentration to maintain the wave. He was a teleporter. I mean, they gave him some fancy stuff, and the surfboard was short. I remember that. It was like a boogie board.
So moving along quickly, we go to someone who moves exceptionally fast, North Star. I gave him costume as a 9. I like the dramatic black and white color scheme that he had. For powers, I gave him an 8, and overall, I gave him a 10. I've always loved North Star, and when I read Alpha Flight back in 1990, I was too young and too naive to pick it up. But throughout the entire series, Aurora keeps making hints about his sexuality. And it's never said until Alpha Flight 106 where he's like, I'm gay. And even when I read it back then, I was like, oh, cool, he's gay. That's cool. I've reread Alpha Flight since then. And now I'm old enough and mature enough to, I don't know if mature is the right word, but I understand the references when she says stuff like, you going out camping with a bunch of boys has never been a problem with you before. And I was like, oh.
Yeah, they really planted those seeds, huh?
They planted those seeds the entire time. And back then I would just like, oh, he goes camping with his friends. Why is she giving him about that? You know what I mean? I was like, I go camping with my friends. Yeah. What does that mean? So now I see it. He stands out to me as more than just a speedster. He's got like the speed, he can fly. He and Aurora are different. Like one is quicker, but one is better at control. I like the fact that he's openly gay. So much cool stuff about North Star. Yeah. I gave him 9, 8, and a 10. Like, really dig the character.
I gave him a 5, and a 6. So the costume, I appreciate that Alpha Flight always wore matching costumes. Alpha Flight was good at that, and I appreciate that, even though their costumes were a little plain. The powers, I wasn't a huge North Star fan like you were. He was a speedster. He was super fast. He was the team speedster. I gave it a 5. And overall, I gave him a 6. I think the character is pretty cool.
And then we go from the speedster to the young sister of Cannonball, who is Husk. For her costume, I gave her a 1, because the only costume I really remember is her Generation X costume, the red one, which was kind of And then for powers, I gave her a 7. Thought it was kind of cool that she can rip away her skin. Kind of gross. And then overall, I give her a 6. She's cool, unique power set, but nothing that stood out a lot.
I really like Husk. I don't know what it is about the Guthries. They have a really weird dynamic, and just like the fact that they're sort of like down south kind of Kentucky coal mining family. Like I don't know what it is about that. It's funny. Like when I read these characters, like I always give them a really thick Southern accent. So for Husk, for her costume, I gave her a 4 for sort of the same reason. She's constantly ripping off whatever she has on. I do like her red costume. Her powers are very unique. I gave her a 6. Like, imagine being like so mad that you just rip your skin off and you're just like
you're full metal, like
come at me, bro. So visually, that was always really fun to see her just like tearing her skin off. Overall, I gave her a 5. I liked her. Same thing. Like, she doesn't make or break a team for me, and it's cool when she's on the team.
But I mean, can you imagine being in a fight with her if you're like a supervillain and suddenly you see this chick just rip off her skin? I mean, would you even hang around to see what's going to happen? Like, I'm fighting this girl and she's ripping off her face. I'm going to be like, okay, I'm done. Like, I'm leaving. Like, I don't need the Hannibal Lecter stuff happening.
Yeah, that's a little weird.
You win, okay? Yeah, the Guthries even have, at least I know, one other mutant. The dude who had wings and stuff like that and played guitar. He appeared during Austin's run, I think.
Yes. Oh, yes. I know who you're talking about. He was an angel. But yeah, I know you're talking about.
Apparently, they have a lot of mutant potential. Like, that's who Sinister should probably check out. Like, this family has a lot of mutant children. Like, forget Scott and Alex. That's just 2 kids. These guys have had at least 3 that I know of. So going from Husk, we move on to the man who is a mountain. He is none other than Juggernaut. For him, costume, I gave him a 9. I would have probably given him a 10, but I probably doused out my 10s elsewhere. I mean, it's a brown costume, right? And he just has a big condom headpiece on, but it fits.
And I love that they always give him those like knuckles, that like plate across his knuckles.
I
guess he doesn't really need them, but it's just fits so perfectly.
And then for his powers, I gave him 8. Probably, again, I would have probably scored him higher if I didn't use my points elsewhere, because I love that every time he fights the X-Men, he's literally, you can't stop him unless you find a way to take off that headpiece, and you happen to have a telepath on the team, which is probably why the X-Men always have a telepath on their team.
Yeah.
Just in case Juggernaut comes knocking on their door, they're like, we just got to take off his headpiece, and telepath A, you just need to zap him in the brain. And then overall, I gave him an 8.
One of my favorite all-time X-Men characters, X-Men villain. I'm sorry, 9 for costume, 10 for powers, and then a 9 overall. He's a staple, man. He is a staple. His power set is one that you have to find new ways to defeat him. What, person doesn't just dream of like putting their head down and just running through buildings.
Whatever's in your way.
Just so pissed off. You would slam your head through buildings, and his look is awesome. We spoke about him earlier. Like, they always draw him so inconsistent. Sometimes it's the size of a building, sometimes it's the size of a regular person, but he always looks bad.
Yeah, my preference is the exaggerated Juggernaut.
Yeah, where it was just like these two beady eyes. It's basically a mountain with legs. Even with all that, like he's so versatile in that he can be a one-issue villain. He does well as in a villain team, with the Brotherhood, as paired up with Black Tom Cassidy. And he's also been a good guy, which granted most X-Men villains have, but they did him very well. Like I still have a hard time being convinced that Sabretooth is an X-Men, or you should even be allowed to join the X-Men.
Why you pick on my dude?
Yeah, it's like letting a wolf into your house.
It happens in the X-Men. Every time they let him in, Sabretooth, he betrays him.
He does, and he ends up killing somebody, and he ends up killing some young mutant or something. It's like, dude, stop letting this friggin' berserk animal into your house. But with the Juggernaut, the run that he was sort of partnered up, he like made friends with Fish Boy.
I was going to ask you about that because I think you actually really like that story, right?
I loved that story because they did that story so right, where Juggernaut ended up like, he was a part of the team. They didn't trust him. He said, hey, I'm trying to be reformed. It really felt like the Juggernaut was making an effort to be good, and then Black Tom comes and entices him, and he sort of like is poking at him to remind him, this isn't you, you're a bad guy, and he ends up leaving the team in a very redeemed fashion. I recommend it. It's a great story.
You know what would have been a cool cover?
What's that?
So you remember when Rogue joins the X-Men, there's that picture of her running and it says, welcome to the X-Men, hope you survive the experience. Very, very iconic saying now. It would have been kind of cool if they would have shown Juggernaut like on the cover standing there and all the X-Men laid out cold. And it says something like, welcome to the X-Men, hope the X-Men survive the experience.
That would have been really good.
That would have been really cool. And they're all just laid out, just Juggernaut standing there.
That would have been a great twist. They missed an opportunity there.
We go from our star Juggernaut to the guy with the star in his head, the other Zorn, which is actually Magneto. This version of Zorn, it's 111 again.
Because we basically have two Zorns on here. I liked the Zorn before he was Magneto, before everything fell apart. Everything after that, I don't really care for.
So from the mysterious Zorn, we go to the mystique of Mystique. Like, I've had a crush on Mystique since I was a kid. Like, I've always thought she was actually hotter than White Queen. Like, her outfit was somehow sexier. That white thing and the skull on her forehead. I don't know. Apparently I like blue. So for Mystique, on her costume, I gave her a 10 because I thought she looked really cool. She looked lethal, scary as heck, but somehow still attractive. And then for her powers, I gave her an 8. I like that she can shapeshift. And then overall, I gave her a 9.
Costume, I gave her a 7. I feel like I may have run out of higher numbers because I also like the white sort of like, it's a classic look, with the skull on her forehead, right? So she's one of those characters that also, it's like, it's not so much the costume, it's the look, because even when she's wearing like pants and a regular top, like, she looks cool.
And then next on our list, we move forward from Mystique and go on a warpath for the character Warpath. It's no surprise. Costume, I gave him a 10 because his first costume was based off of Thunderbirds. I've liked pretty much every version that he's made after that. For his powers, I gave him a 7. It's pretty much just like his brothers. Super strength, super speed, and during an issue where they encounter Mimic says, hey, you have untapped potential that you don't even know. And I don't know if they ever explored that because I stopped collecting X-Force later on. And then overall, I gave him an 8 because I liked the Native American characters.
I gave Warpath a 4 for the costume. Did you like the black and white sort of X-Force costume that he had?
Yeah, with that mask on his face. Yeah.
And then Powers, I gave him a 6, and then overall, I gave him a 5.
And then from Warpath, there's no smooth transition. Lady Mastermind, who there happened to be 2 of them. Like there was a story where they introduced one, but then in another X-Men comic, she was over here doing something else and like she got killed. But then for consistency's sake, there's apparently 2 Lady Masterminds and it's a train wreck. To me, the original Mastermind is always going to be the best. I love his storyline with what he did to Jean Grey, accidentally unlocks the Dark Phoenix in her. So later Mastermind is just a weak version of him. I gave her a 1-1-1.
Yeah, 1-1-1.
And then next, we let the feral animal in our house to judge him this time. We were talking about Sabretooth, who I gave 10-10-10, which is no surprise. If you know anything about me, I love Sabretooth's look. I loved his original costume, even the costume later with the X-Men with Jim Lee, Chris Claremont, where it's more modernized. Love his costume now. Sabretooth has always been a favorite for the fact that he is simply a feral animal. And when he shows up, it's going to be a good fight.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. This is a classic X-Men villain, a classic Wolverine villain. I gave him an 8 for the costume, a 7 for his powers, and then a 9 overall. He is, to me, he's sort of epitomizes the killing machine, sort of you can't trust him, bloodthirsty type character. And even when they don't play him that way, right? So when he goes sort of less feral and he's more conniving, I like that. Like in the early run of the X-Men Blue, the 90s X-Men Blue, when he sort of mixed in with his New Orleans underworld and he's sort of this sleazy dude, like it still fits him perfect. I love Sabretooth.
Next, we move from the Sabretooth mutant to Omega Sentinel, who I gave 1-1-1.
1-1-1 as well.
So we'll move right past that, and then we'll go to Armor. She's cool. I like that she has that telekinetic armor kind of thing around her, but overall, there was nothing that she's ever done that impressed me, so I gave her a 1-1-1.
Yeah, I gave Armor a 4, 5, and a 1. 4 for costume, 5 for powers, and 1 overall. I do like the Armor look. That's really cool. I think it's creative. Not a huge fan of the character for the most part. From the little that I know of her, it's like great potential. Just haven't seen it yet.
All right. Then next we move to the spacefaring Hepzibah, who is formerly from the Starjammers. For her costume, I gave her an 8. I actually really like that design that they gave her. One of the cool things is one of her male species, they were in the Nova Corps too, which I thought was really cool. And then for her powers, I just gave her a 5. She is pretty much like a humanoid cat. You know, she's got the quick reflexes, the tail, the claws, the bite, the slight healing factor. Overall, I gave her an 8 though, because she is a part of the Starjammers and Corsair's main squeeze.
She gets a default extra few points
just for being a Starjammer. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not a huge fan. I don't know that character well enough.
Yeah.
So 1-1-1.
Next, we move to Pixie, who I gave her costume. I gave a 5. She's usually kind of flying around in the classic black and yellow X-Men costume, but she's got like these big like wings and she has this pink hair. I thought it stuck out a little more, so I gave her a 5 rather than just, it's another costume of the X-Men. Her powers, I gave a 5. She has the ability to teleport and stuff like that. Oh, and she has part of the Soul Sword from Ilyana. And then overall, I gave her a 6. Of all the new characters that they introduced back then with like Armor, Omega Sentinel, I thought she stuck out the most.
1-1-1.
Yeah. Speaking of new characters and new mutants, we go to Karma, who I gave a 5 for her costume. And then, because it's the generic she's been in a few costumes, but the one I always remember is just the generic black and yellow. Powers, I gave 4 because it's just possession. But overall, I gave her an 8 because she was part of the original New Mutants, which I've always loved.
Oh, man, you're not going to want to hear this. 1-1-1.
You're so wrong.
I honestly, I think I just burned all my other numbers on these other characters.
Speaking of New Mutants, one of my other favorite characters I mentioned earlier, we go to Sunspot, who I gave an 8 for costume. I actually really, really liked it. It's so simple. It's silly. Like when he was like all black and then he'd have like the yellow dot or the dots around him and then the yellow aurora around him. Dude, I loved that costume. It was so simple, but I really liked it. And I liked that he had super strength, but he had limits, right? Like he had to be charged by the sun. And just because he had super strength, he was not invulnerable. Like if you shoot him, he would still bleed. So I kind of dug that he had super strength, but he didn't have the traditional I'm invulnerable also. 4 for powers because it is just super strength and stuff like that. And then overall 8 again because he's New Mutant and he was one of my favorites. What do you got?
Yeah, actually, we're going to take it up a little bit here from the ones. I gave him a 7 for his costume. You're absolutely right. The look was very unique.
Yep.
It was just a cool look. And I gave him an 8 for his powers. And then overall, I give him an 8. I like Sunspot. I'm happy when he's on the team.
And then speaking of Sunspot's Aurora, we move to Aurora, the sister of Northstar. For costume, I gave her a 7. What did I give Northstar? Yeah. So, all right. So she scored a little bit lower than Northstar on the costume. For powers, I gave her a 4. Probably, again, I was running out of points. She's a speedster. And then for overall, I gave her an 8.
So for costume, I gave her a 1. I was probably running out of points. And I'd already given someone on Alpha Flight a
high score.
A higher number. So it's like, you guys are all wearing the same costume. I can't give you all 5s or all 6s. For powers, I gave her 6, though. I thought it was pretty cool that, she was on this team of like Northern Hemisphere superheroes, and she had this like light generation manipulation. Her name was Aurora. Like the whole theme was cool. But overall, I gave her a 1. I'm not a huge Alpha Flight fan.
Like when she had her long hair, I always thought she was really hot. So speaking of hot, we go to Magma. See how I'm tying all these in? Like I'm making this flow. So for Magma, I gave her a 5 for her costume. She's kind of like Sunspot, right? When she was all lit up, she had the fire, and then her hair was like all pointy, like kind of like it looked like kind of a star thing. So I kind of like that. For powers, though, I gave her a 4. It's just she manipulates lava. But overall, I gave her an 8 because her initial appearance in New Mutants in the Nova Roma, I thought it was great. They up her story later on, but whatever. I scored it on that and gave her an 8.
Was Magma in the X-Men video game?
She might have been. Maybe in X-Men Legends, yeah.
I'm wondering, I'm looking at Magma and I'm like, I gave her some pretty high scores for a character that I know little of. So for her costume, I gave her a 2, power 6, and then overall, I gave her a 3. Now, though, I think the main reason why I didn't give her like 1s across the board, not that she was a terrible character, I just never really read it. You're right. In the New Mutants, her story was pretty good. But she was in X-Men Legends. She was the main protagonist, and I loved that game. And I almost feel like that was her first appearance. Like she was a character created for X-Men Legends that crossed over into the books and became a staple character. So I might be wrong on that. I may have made that up.
Yeah, because I think New Mutants 12 predates X-Men Legends.
In the 80s?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Then never mind. Then I totally made that up.
Yeah, so she appeared in New Mutants number 8, first appearance in 1983. Because of that, that's where Selene came from, the Black Queen, and that was her main nemesis. Now you know where I'm going with this? Because next we have Dr. Nemesis, who I gave a 111.
I'm a 111 as well. Honestly, when his name came up, I was like, who?
So I always confuse him because I know he was around at the same time as Phantom X. I know who Phantom X is. He's the guy that reminds me of Dr. Nemesis. Snake Eyes' his villain from G.I. Joe. Snowstorm?
No, Storm Shadow.
Storm Shadow. That's who he always reminds me of when I see Phantom X. We go back to Alpha Flight again, and we bring in Box, who is Jamie Madison. And for him, I gave him a 4 for his costume because he usually just ran around in a shirt unless he manipulated armor. For his powers, I gave him a 3. I didn't really like it too much. In Alpha Flight, he would do things like build a jet from a few pieces of metal. I never liked him. It was kind of like the Scott and Emma Frost thing, like Guardian died or Vindicator, and his wife became the new Guardian, whatever. And they forced basically Box to be that love interest, and it never fit. Like, so yeah, 4, 3, and 6 overall. Just because he's Alpha Flight, I gave him a little bit higher than average.
That's way high. I don't know very much about this dude. Like hardly anything at all. He sort of reminds me of.
He's like Forge. He has essentially the same power as Forge.
I give him a 111. I don't know enough about him, and for him to be like a C-list Alpha Flight character, like dude. Yeah. forget it.
Like he's I don't know who came first, if it was Box or Forge, but they're essentially the same character. I don't know what they call it, but he can move metal, kind of like Magneto, so he can just move stuff and shape it.
Do they call it magic?
It was like magic, because next we have Magic. Who is I almost said daughter of Colossus, the sister of Colossus. For her costume, I gave her a 7. One of my favorite costumes of her is when she was like the demon child, where she had like the hooves and like the horns and the silver arm. Thought that was a great look. For her powers, though, I gave her a 3. I mean, it's cool that she can teleport through time and space, but it's not a very unique power. I did like that when she teleports, no matter where she goes, you always side trip through the limbo first. Like, you don't just teleport. You actually have to stop through limbo and then keep going.
Yeah.
I thought that's kind of cool. You're like, ah! Oh, okay. And then overall, I did give her an 8. Literally, I think my score of 8 is mostly based off of Uncanny X-Men 160 and the Magic 4-issue limited series, with all of it with being with Bolesco and stuff like that. That whole segment I love.
I really like Magic. For her costume, less costume, more look, I gave her a 9. She's held a lot of cool looks. The costume that you mentioned is awesome, but just like, the blonde bangs and the just like white eyes and the giant soul sword, and it's just so weird and cool. For powers, I gave her an 8. She does do teleportation, but she does it in a unique way that she goes through limbo.
What was her overall for her?
Overall, I gave her a 9. And then I like that Magic now as an adult is sort of like, I don't want to say ruined or tainted, but she is now like the ruler of a hellish dimension. Yep. And like it's sort of like a lost innocence, right? Because she was taken as a really young child, and she's now, as an adult, she sort of shrugs. It's sort of like a PTSD sort of, this is my life now, there's no going back, there's no helping me, right? It's just, overall, it's a cool story. I like Magic.
So I have a question. Since you brought up her sword, what sword do you prefer? Because before, her original soul sword kind of looked like a lightsaber, and now it looks like the Final Fantasy VII Cloud sword.
Final Fantasy VII Cloud. I like that giant, the thick blade.
Yeah. So we disagree on that. Like I liked it just being like the lightsaber. Like, she just whips it out and pulls it out whenever she needs it, rather than always having it strapped on her back.
I don't know why. I've just always sort of liked that soul sword, the bigger one. I think maybe because it's sort of like a weird juxtaposition, because she's like this dainty, thin little, like this blonde girl with bangs, and then she has this like giant. It's the same reason why I thought it was cool that Cloud had it, because it's like unreasonably big.
Yeah, he's dainty, blonde, and has bangs.
Exactly, he is Magic.
So when it comes to the sword, you don't prefer the smaller one. You say, nay, more.
Yes.
See what I did there? That was a stretch. That was totally a stretch.
No,
but next we go to
good.
We go to Namor, the Submariner, who I gave a 1, 1, and a 1. I like Namor. I've loved him in Defenders, but as an X-Men, I hated it.
You'd say Namor, I say Namor. I gave him a 3 for his look. I mean, he's the OG mutant, right? He's the original mutant, but he's sort of just rocks Speedos. Besides that, for his powers, I gave him a 6. He's, very similar to Aquaman, right? Overall, I gave him a 7. It's kind of weird, because even though he is considered a mutant, I don't really consider him an X-Men necessarily.
Maybe I dislike him because he killed one of the members of Alpha Flight. He married Mariana, I believe it's how it's pronounced. And she's like this alien Plodex thing, and she eventually turns into the alien form, which is like devouring. So he grabbed Black Knight's sword and kills her.
So he did the world a favor, huh?
If you're hoping this is the last one, you're in luck, because we're going to talk about Domino. I gave her costume, I gave a 1. I like that she has that little patch around her eye, but at that time, Liefeld was drawing everyone with patches around their eye, so I don't think she stood out very much costume-wise. For her powers, I gave her a 3. Because to me, my preference is Longshot. So when I think of someone who manipulates luck in any form, I think of Longshot first. And overall, I gave her a 1. She's in the new Weapon X book, and she's been pretty cool in there, but nothing that I would say would change my score at all.
So for her look, I gave her a 7. You're right. She did have the patch on the eye as like many other characters, but her name's Domino, so it sort of made sense.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Yeah, the black and white, the pale with the black dot, like a domino. Get it? All right, cool.
Yeah, I got it.
Yeah. Her powers, I gave her a 7. Like you said, very similar to Longshot, but where Longshot had the, as long as he was doing, something
Motives
he
were
believed to be,
pure.
his motives were pure. It worked. With Domino, she was sort of like a black ops type character.
Yeah,
like
she can use it for whatever.
Even though she is a good guy, she's definitely sort of a gray area type character. I just like that. I don't know why. That is pretty cool. So she can manipulate the odds to her favor. She has a cool look, and she's also like a bad.
All right. So then that wraps up for the 2000s.
Nice. That was, I don't know how you're going to chop this up, but that was like a 5-hour podcast, I think.
Yeah, 4 hours and 7 minutes.
Yeah, time for some breakfast, right? Well, we had a lot of ground to cover. We hadn't done this for a while, so hopefully the next one won't be too far out, and we won't have as much catching up to do. Cool, man. Well, thank you to everyone for listening. Tom, can you still do it? Where can they find us?
They can find us at www.comicreliefpodcast.com. Or go to facebook.com/Comic Relief Podcast. Or go to twitter.com/ I forgot our Twitter.
Comic Relief Pod C?
Yeah, there you go. So Twitter is, as Maiko said, twitter.com/Comic Relief Pod C. And then our Instagram is instagram.com/Comic Relief Pod C. So go like us, follow us, stalk us. We love it.
Please like us.
And tell your friends to like us too.
Yeah, tell everybody to like us.
We're very
All right,
insecure.
Thanks for listening.
All right, thanks for listening, everyone.
Till
next time. Peace.
Thank you for listening to the Comic Relief Podcast.
We'll hope you join us next time as we continue to discuss all things comic book related.
And until then, make mine Marvel
And DC.
and independent. Don't forget to check us out at comicreliefpodcast.com, or you can visit our Facebook page at www.facebook.com/Comic Relief Podcast, or go to our YouTube channel, www.youtube.com/Comic Relief Podcast. And finally, there is our Twitter page, which is twitter.com/Comic Relief PODC. I'd like to give a special shout out to Travis Richards, who did the music for the Comic Relief Podcast. Visit his website at www.travisarichards.com.
What? So am I just hanging out until Tom gets on here? Or?
Yeah, I mean, let's do it. Did he ask you to jump on, or did I?
No. He. Oh, here he comes. He just had to see that both of them are recording. Hold, please.
So our next podcast is going to be about Logan Lucky.
Yeah.
Or Lucky Logan.
I'm looking at the news like, oh, something about the director and he's not happy, and I'm like, wait, no, that's not the director. This is a whole different movie.
Yeah, are we gonna try to do that 15-minute thing for each one?
Let's try it, man. I'll have my
I was about to start a timer.
my timer on. It doesn't have to be exactly 15 minutes. I just don't want to go on for like, all right, we're gonna talk about the first movie, and then an hour and a half later, we've only gone through Logan.
Got his family, and then he's like, "Oh, you're here to pick up my daughter," and I was like, "What?"
Little crimes and stolen bikes and stuff like that.
That's funny.
Yeah, I thought that was done
Whose bike
really
is
well.
this? Is this your bike?
Yeah.
It's kind of like Napoleon Dynamite. When I first saw that movie, I was like, "What the did I just watch?"
Let me see. I gave Slipstream a 5 for costume, a 5 for powers, and 6 overall.
That's nope. Go 1 up.
What?
You're on the wrong row, dude. That's North Star.
Oh yeah, 111. As I was reading that out, I was Googling Slipstream because those are pretty decent numbers. And I'm like, I don't remember liking this dude that much. I remember him being a surfer.
Go in. Enjoy your day, man.
Yeah, you too.
All right, bye.
Bye.